Okay, so that just leaves me to introduce our speaker today, my colleague Probal, who is a subject matter expert in enterprise scheduling and workload automation strategy. So Probal, over to you.
Thanks very much, Claire. Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about workload automation and in particular migrating to the IBM solution, IBM Workload Automation, and we'll have a demonstration of that product, and we'll talk through the migration process and things like that and why people are doing it today. It's really prevalent at the moment. There's lots of this stuff going on, hence the reason why we're having this webinar to actually go through it all. Okay. So as Claire said, my name's Probal. I've been doing this for quite a long time. So really in the workload automation space over 15 years. I've been in the IT industry for a lot longer than that. This is an old photo of mine. I've got a lot more grey hair now. And like most people on LinkedIn, I use an old photo so that I look younger than I actually am. But yeah, this is me. And I've been around for a long time working in this space in particular. And I've seen how it's evolved over time. And that's part of what we'll go through today. But really what we'll gain from this session is why people are moving now in particular. It's never been more prevalent than before, and we'll see why that is. Our solution is called Workload Migrator. It's an ETL tool to migrate you from your current scheduler over to the IBM solution, and we only migrate to IBM. And we'll look at the IBM Workload Automation product itself, and then we'll look at how to assess how you go about doing your migration, and the prerequisite steps that you need to take, because there's a lot of things that need to be thought about. And we'll see that most people fixate on technology, but really it's the people side of things that is the biggest consideration. And actually lining all that sort of stuff up beforehand that ensures that when you start your migration journey, that it's done successfully, because everyone's moving in the same direction. Okay. So today's agenda, we've had the welcome already. We'll look at who Elyzium are to start with, and then we'll look at the changes within the workload automation landscape and what's actually going on in the industry today, because there's a lot of change going on. And then your migration journey, what are the steps, what are the considerations? And then we'll look at the specific offering that we have, which is called Workload Migrator, and you can find out more information about it at workloadmigrator.com. And then we'll look at the IBM solution, IBM Workload Automation, or IBM Workload Scheduler. As some of you may know it, historically it used to be called Tivoli Workload Scheduler, and we'll see why, how that came about. And then we'll have a Q&A session at the end, and then go from there, I guess. So hopefully today will be informative for you. Hopefully we can have some fun as well. It's not, I don't want to have a boring, monotone presentation. Similarly, this is not a sales presentation either. This is a real world presentation. These are considerations. This is not something that, isn't the world wonderful and everything works out fine. We know in the real world that doesn't take place, but you have to mitigate risk as you go along. Think about the considerations that you have, think about what needs to be done, and plan accordingly. And then those are the keys to success. And that's what we'll talk about as part of this. This is not just a boring old sales presentation. This is really a discussion about what happens in the real world and things to consider. Okay, so in the beginning, back in 1996, IBM acquired a company called Tivoli Systems. And they bought them because at the time, BMC, CA, and every other systems management vendor, their biggest customer was IBM. IBM strategic outsourcing was growing rapidly, and IBM recognized that systems management was one of the areas where they were spending a lot of money with other companies, whereas they could be doing that internally. So they went out, they acquired this company, very small at the time, but had quite a lot of press coverage, called Tivoli Systems, who are based in Austin, Texas. And the Tivoli brand was introduced inside IBM. Soon after, IBM acquired another company called Unison, and they had a product called Maestro, and that became the Tivoli Workload Scheduler. And that's where now it's called IBM Workload Scheduler. But in order to migrate outsourced customers within the IBM infrastructure over to Tivoli, IBM ran 3 very large projects globally, one in the US, one in Europe, and one in Asia Pacific, to move their outsourced customers over to the Tivoli product set. The European part of that project was run out of IBM Paris and was called Project Elyzium, and that's where the founders of our company came from. So we're very close to IBM. A lot of our founders and employees have come from IBM, myself included. I worked for IBM a very long time ago. But I was working in the Tivoli space at the time when IBM acquired them. So really, the background of Elysium and IBM, Tivoli, and the Unison acquisition are all interlinked. And that's why we've grown up with the IBM solution. We know it, we trust it, we know its capabilities, and we have that level of expertise. And we've become trusted advisors for a lot of organizations around the world for that product set. And that's what's remained. But new customers coming in, the migration side of things is something we developed a long time ago. It's grown up, it's evolved to the point where we have a lot of assets in order to migrate people across to what we still call Tivoli Workload Scheduler. IBM don't like us calling it that. We have to call it IBM Workload Scheduler instead. But if I slip and say Tivoli Workload Scheduler, please forgive me, because I've been doing this for quite a long time. But yes, that's the background. It's kind of ingrained in what we do, and our relationship with IBM goes hand in hand with the product set and also with the migration side of things. So Elysium has been around since 1998. So there's 27 years. We're a gold IBM business partner because we resell licenses, we do the services side of things, training. We even have our own managed service. We've won awards with IBM, and subsequently we were introduced to Red Hat. We've become a Red Hat partner, and we do automation products within the Red Hat portfolio, and also with HCL as well. HCL and IBM partner very closely in the workload automation space. So we're both an IBM partner and an HCL partner as well. So that's a little bit of background on who we are and kind of where we came from and how we grew up together with IBM in this space, just to show the closeness of our relationship. And that's why we always recommend the IBM product set to migrate to. But why are organizations migrating? I'd love to give you technical reasons. One widget is better than the other. Frankly, it's not. The reason why people are migrating is because of cost. People are seeing costs escalate within their current product set to the point where they're being told by their senior management, we need to get off this platform. And the reason for it is, I mean, it's come from the Broadcom acquisition of CA. So Broadcom went out, they bought CA, they then bought Symantec, now they've bought VMware. And what they're doing is changing license models, as a result of which customers are paying more money. This model has been picked up by virtually all of the venture capital organizations. And this is why BMC, Redwood, Stone Branch, all of these others are changing their models and actually seeing increased revenues. Redwood is a great example. I mean, it says here, before the CPS product, the scheduler was free. It was included as part of SAP. They've now changed that, and either you go to Run My Jobs, which is a chargeable solution, or you go to a different solution, but it's suddenly become chargeable. So Broadcom, the way they've changed the marketplace within the workload automation space, but in other areas as well, because Symantec have seen similar things, is that customers, because the license model has changed, the license terms have changed, they're seeing dramatically increased costs. I had a call with one CIO who had seen a 5-fold increase in their renewal. And this is why senior management in a lot of organizations are saying, we need to get off Broadcom, Redwood, BMC, you name it. Anyone that has a VC behind them is starting to adopt this model, and customers are seeing costs rise dramatically. So as I said, I'd love to say that, there's some fantastic widget that's in IWS that nobody else can do. But the reality is that organizations are moving because of cost and relationships rather than technology. And the industry seems to be going this way. It's not just workload automation, it's the whole of the software industry. And we're seeing quite a lot of toxic software out there at the moment where customers are looking to get off a current solution onto a different one. And again, this is a benefit of IBM, is that they have rules and regulations that means that renewal prices can't increase beyond a certain level. It's quite a low percentage. They certainly wouldn't increase renewal prices by 85 or 120%. So that stability, that predictability has actually benefited IBM greatly as a result. So yeah, from a commercial point of view, IBM suddenly becomes a very good proposition. But as we know with technology, most schedulers can do 80-90% of what another scheduler can do. So historically, that's why people didn't move, because of risk. But now with this increased cost, more and more organizations are saying, we've got to do this. We've got to mitigate the risk, and we've got to do this as quickly as possible. And this is exactly where Workload Migrator comes in, because we've been doing this for years. So this is really where we are with the workload automation landscape, is that, yeah, the driver for change is commercial rather than technical. Okay. So why does it matter now? Yeah, because of the license changes, people are now focusing on risk. It's not a question of should we do this, it's a question of how do we do this, and making sure that we don't have an outage as a result. Workload automation is one of those products where it's completely anonymous within most organizations until it goes wrong. And then people realize, well, it ships data from one application to another. And if that fails, then the business impact is massive. And we've seen with banks and various other organizations that when workload automation fails, it becomes news headlines. And that's what people want to avoid when moving from one product to another. So how do we mitigate risk in order to leverage the predictable cost of software? So we look at how to move people in a flexible and scalable way that reduces operational risk. Okay, so the migration journey can be categorized in 4 areas. So the first one is to assess where you are today. What exactly is there? What state is it in? And then how do you map that to a move? Because the pitfalls, one of the major pitfalls is a big bang approach. If you've got 10, 20, 30,000 jobs, or in some cases into the millions, you do not want to do a big bang approach. That's far too risky. You want to do it in bite-sized pieces. So again, you assess where you are, you then plan the migration, the steps in order to get there, align with your stakeholders, because as I was saying at the start of the presentation, it's the people side of things that you have to consider as much as how do I do this technically? Because you have to align with people's expectations. You have to make sure that they're on board. They know the timescales. They know the journey that's going to take place, and they're fully bought into it so that they know what to expect. And then the third stage is actually the migration. And then the fourth is optimization. So when you plan in phase 2, effectively that becomes your workload automation strategy. So what are you going to migrate in the first step? And then what are you going to optimize in the following steps? Because the way things are done today may not be ideal. How do you want to change that? Rather than changing it as you go along, you want to potentially migrate as is, because that's the quickest way of doing it. And then plan an optimization phase where you then consolidate. Once you've consolidated, you can then make those changes as part of optimization. So your plan, which is a living document effectively, allows you to not only migrate, but then optimize, exploit the new tool set, and also change the way things are done, because chances are things were put in place years ago. The person that did it has left the organization, and you want to do things in a different way. The analogy I always use when talking about workload automation and current environments is a bowl of spaghetti. Over time, things have become intertwined and intermixed and all this sort of stuff. And it's unpicking all of that and then moving that across in a bite-sized order in order to get from where you are today to where you need to in the future. And this is how we underpin those 4 steps. So you've got the assess, plan, migrate, and optimize. And we have various steps in order to get there. And then what you see underneath is the services that we provide in order to get there. So to build your plan, so assess where you are and build your plan, we have a discovery exercise, which we call the workload assessment, and it's a transition plan. Where are you today? Where do you need to get to? And the roadmap of how to get there. Then Workload Migrator itself will allow you to do that migration. As I was saying before, it's an ETL tool, and we use that ETL tool in the workload assessment as well. So we can then do a data-driven migration So the data you have within your current environment will give you clusters of jobs with job dependencies. Those clusters can be grouped together so that there are no dependencies outside the group, and then that group can be moved, and then you've got that bite-size migration plan that I was talking about before. So we use Migrator itself. There's an analyzer component which is used in the assessment phase, and then the Migrator part is actually used for the migrate phase to actually get you across. And then in order to provide functional testing, you need to be trained on the new product. It's not just a question of implementing it. The people that will be running it in the future, all of the stakeholders that need access to the new tool will need to be trained so that they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing today in their current product, but then how do they translate that into how they do things in the new environment? Well, they have to be trained. Some of that is formal training, some of it is skills transfer. But that knowledge, in order to run it afterwards, is important. Okay, and then the last one, expert care, is our support offering. So again, hypercare period, all of those sorts of things, as well as ongoing support should that be necessary. So all of those phases have been catered for, and we've developed this over time. So it's very flexible in the way it works and how we can do things based on customer need, rather than being rigid. This is what you do, this is how you do it, all that sort of stuff. Every organization is different, and we have to adapt to customer processes as well as the people side of things. I was talking to one organization the other day who was saying that migrating jobs, people think it's very easy. It's X becomes Y in terms of job X in one product becomes job X in another product, but it uses a different mechanism. But it's not, because it's actually closer to language. So the way you say something in one language can be said in a number of ways in another language, and it's making sure that you adapt the migration process so that it's understandable. So if you're saying one thing in one language, what you're saying in another language and its meaning is accurate. So it's those nuances that have to be catered for individually with each customer. And again, this is why Workload Migrator has been developed and adapted to make sure that that takes place. Okay. And we've done this, as you can imagine, over the last 27 years. We've done this for a lot of organizations, hundreds, in fact. Originally, we worked very closely with IBM outsourcing, and so as outsourced customers came on board, we would do their migration because outsourcing would use a standardized tool set. IBM Workload Scheduler was the workload automation product of choice, so we would do that migration. But over time, we've worked with lots of partners, end user organizations, all this sort of stuff. And I've got a couple of case studies at the end that I can go through. But we have done this quite a few times before. Okay. So what are the considerations when thinking about a migration? What are the inhibitors that people think, oh God, we can't do this? These are the reasons why. First one is risk. It's too risky. Our environment's too big. It's too complex. It's too intertwined. How do we unbundle all this? How do we untangle all this? It's too risky. well, having that methodology, using the tool set to do a data-driven migration is the way to go. It's the way to de-risk projects. Nothing's risk-free, nothing's, guaranteed. We've all been around long enough to know that. But it's how you make sure that you mitigate risk, how you capture things moving forward to ensure that problems don't occur. So taking something that's high risk, mitigating that risk so that it's a lower risk. The second one is rate of change. Workload automation doesn't stand still. There are constant changes going on within your current environment. And how do you capture those changes? How do you make sure that those changes move from one product to another? Well, the way you do it is by using an ETL tool, because you're extracting, translating, and loading. So as it changes within your source environment, you extract, translate, and load into the target environment, IWS. And that all becomes part of your functional testing plan, so that you make sure that what you're testing is like for like within a particular data block. And then once you're happy that everything is working, you have a short change freeze within your current environment for that data block while you switch over to the new one. And then once it's live, that block is complete and you can move to the next block. So the rate of change is something that we can overcome with the methodology and with the tool set that underpins it. Limited knowledge. As I was saying, we've had organizations that have had products in for 25, 30 years, and the person that did a lot of it has now retired, has left the organization. So how do we go about making sure that it's A, done correctly, and B, that it's needed moving forward? Well, the whole process of where are you today, where do you need to get to, gives you that opportunity to say, how do we clean this up moving forward? Is it still needed? We use a traffic light system, red, amber, green. Red means it's no longer needed, doesn't need to be migrated. Amber means it's migrated but not tested. Green means it's needed, so therefore migrated, tested, all those sorts of things. It goes through the full process. Again, it's the cleanest way of doing it. It's the quickest way of doing it. And in that way, you're not taking too much time, which is another consideration, and therefore too much cost. You don't want to wind up spending more money than you expected to while doing the migration. And again, one of the big reasons for getting off your current environment is cost. Therefore, the quicker you do it, the less it'll cost, the more you'll save. So these are the inhibitors, and this is how, and we overcome all of these using Workload Migrator and the methodology for the migration itself. But what we found, the methods of migration are really threefold. So you can either do it manually, which is incredibly resource intensive, and it gives you probably gives you a 60% accuracy because of the complexity of your current environment. And if you do it manually and you have to fix forward 40% of your environment, that's a massive undertaking, firstly, and a massive cost. Most organizations that try to do it themselves or involve another vendor will use a script in order to do that migration. And that'll give you about an 80% accuracy. So it still means about 20% of your jobs need some sort of intervention to fix forward, moving forward. And again, that's not an ideal way of doing it. And that's why we developed Workload Migrator using standard ETL technology. What we developed is a palette for migration. So you have an input map and an output map that's tailored to your specific requirements, so that what gets translated functionally does exactly the same as what you're doing in your current environment. So that when you do switch the blocks of data one by one, then what you're getting is 100% accuracy in your migration moving forward. So it's important to understand that. So that's Workload Migrator, but the assessment phase, as I was saying, it's where are you today, where do you need to get to, the roadmap of how to get there. What we build is an architectural blueprint. So not only about the data that's moving across, but also the people side of things. Who does it affect? What do they need to do? When do they need to be trained? All of those sorts of elements that then feed into an overall project plan that will be run by the customer, so that both the vendor side of things, us and IBM, and the customer side of things, the current administrators, stakeholders, various other people that need to be involved, are all included in one plan, and everyone knows what's going on, everyone buys into it, and everything moves forward as expected. And then the migration itself, here on the left-hand side, we've got some of the products that you can migrate from, whether that's AutoSys, Control-M, Redwood CPS, or Tidal, Atomic. The list goes on. There's a lot of workload automation products out there that we've migrated from over to IBM Workload Scheduler. And the top part, Workload Analyzer, is used as part of the workload assessment to actually build the data-driven migration. And then the workload converter is the piece that then executes block by block the data that goes across to IWS, that then goes through that short change freeze, goes live, and then you move to the next block. And you do things bite size until all of your data is moved across, and you can then decommission the source scheduler. So this approach and the tooling that's been developed over a long period of time has enabled us to do this in the quickest, most de-risked way of doing things. But as I was saying before, we only move people over to the IBM Workload Scheduler environment because A, we know the product inside out, but it's also an incredibly reliable and flexible way of moving, because the platform side of things can be on mainframe, distributed, containerized, different types of architecture. It is catered for. This example here is for an insurance company based here in the UK called Legal & General. They're one of the biggest insurance companies, but they're also the second largest pension provider in the UK, the largest being the National Health Service. But Legal & General, as a corporation, a public limited company, is the largest pension provider in the UK. And they decided to move from the mainframe to containers within Azure Kubernetes. We proved that IBM Workload Automation was the right solution for them, and that Workload Migrator was the quickest way of getting their mainframe jobs migrated across onto Kubernetes. This project was successful. There's an IBM case study for it, and these are some of the metrics that have come out in the quote that was given by the project manager. So this is a solution, a migration, which is live. They have been live for 12 months now, and it's incredibly reliable. They don't have any problems, and they're very happy. Another example is we can't say the name of this company, but they've allowed us to use the information from it. They're a very large brewery based in North America. Yeah, I don't think I can tell you any more than that. You probably might be able to guess who it is if I tell you any more. But yeah, they're a global brewery, and they were with Broadcom. They were on CA product, Atomic, and again, they saw a massive increase in their um, renewal costs from Broadcom and decided to move. They've done this globally across to the IWS product. And we use Workload Migrator in order to do that migration. Again, it was one that was successful because everyone was pulling in the same direction. And that, again, is key to this. And that's why I keep saying people fixate on technology, but really it's the people side of things. If you get the people side of things right, the technology side follows far easier than if you've got people that are not aligned to what's going on. And in this case, the customer was, and they had a smooth transition from Atomic over to IWS. Okay. Rather than talking about IWS, I'm conscious of the time because I'd like to show you. And I guess that's why a number of you are on this call, is because you actually want to see what IWS looks like. So let's just go straight into the demo. So here it is. And this is the graphical user interface for IWS. This is running on my laptop. It's running in a Docker environment. So again, it shows that it's quite a small footprint that, I can run this as an environment to demo without using too much resource. So IWS itself has three main components in terms of infrastructure. So you have the master domain manager, which is the main management platform, and you can have a high availability version of that because you can have a backup master, so master and a backup master, and you can fail over between the two, giving you that high availability solution. And then you can have a mid tier, which is called a domain manager, and then at the bottom you have agents, and they can either be a fault tolerant agent or a dynamic agent. In this environment, we're only running dynamic agents. So yes, master domain manager, and then agent, or the agent can connect directly to the master to give you a 2-tier rather than the 3-tier architecture. And then the last component, which is called the dynamic workload console, is your web interface. And this is exactly what that is. So this is a container that gives you your graphical user interface, which is what you can do everything in IWS in. So if we log in, excuse me, you'll see that you have, along the top, you have pull-down menus with lots of things that you can do within it. But we'll start with something called the workload dashboard. And this is the summary view of everything that's going on within this domain, this IWS domain. And we can see that we have our workstation information. This is our agents. We have our job information, and then we've got the job status. So we can see here we have 6 available workstations. If we double click on it, we can see the agents that we've got, the master domain manager itself, and hey presto, everything's green. So everything's running. We can see which versions we're on, what type of agent it is, all that sort of information. So this is, from an administrator's point of view, this is what you look at on a day-to-day basis. If something is running late, then again, you will see that. But then you've got, as I was saying, the job status information. So we can see here, we have 12 waiting, and we have 6 that have completed already. So there's not that many jobs running. And then this piece on the left-hand side, critical job status, is you can set deadlines on jobs. And this is something called workload service assurance. So if you set your job has to complete by, say, 6 p.m. every evening, the historical data that it collects, it has analytics information that's baked into the product. And what it will say is, if you set a deadline, what are the ones that are at no risk, potential risk? So based on trending, will it predict that it will reach that deadline, or will it not? Sorry, was that a question? Did you have a question?
Sorry.
Okay.
No.
Okay. I'll carry on. So, where was I? Yes. So from this one summary, we can see that for a particular engine, master domain manager, this is the total environment and what's running. So this is the workload dashboard. And then what we can do is we can drill down and see the jobs that have run successfully. For example, or drill down and see what's waiting. And these are all the jobs that are waiting to be executed. They're all held at the moment. And what do these jobs look like? Now, this is another fundamental thing about IBM Workload Scheduler. It separates out job information from scheduling information. So the job information is, what does it actually do? What does it run? And then the scheduling information, which is known as job streams, is, when does it run? What are its dependencies? All of that sort of information. And all of that is held or configured using the workload designer. And then on the left-hand side, we have a folder structure. So you can create folders for different departments and then put job definitions in those. They're also for security as well. So if you've got an administrator that just looks after sales, you can create an administrator, only give them access to the sales folder, and they can see 1 job stream and 3 job definitions. Whereas somebody that has access to the root folder can see 5 job streams with 10 job definitions. So again, this is how you can secure your workload automation environment. So if we look at the job streams, select one in particular. As you can see, I have no imagination, so I call it demo job stream 1. And we can see that this job stream contains 3 jobs. One that checks the disk, one that then checks the database, and then updates the application. and it has a run cycle. So when does it run? It runs every workday, and workday is defined as Monday to Friday, so it doesn't run at the weekends. You can create run cycles, dependencies, all these sorts of things, and create very complex scenarios using your job stream. So we can see when it's going to run. So yeah, every day apart from the weekends. And then we can look at the graphical view. We can see that first it checks the disk. Once that's complete, it then checks the database and then updates. So the jobs are run sequentially. But you can create conditional dependencies based on return codes or regex, or you can create very complex workflows within your job stream. But at the very lowest level, you have the job, which checks the disk. And what that does is it gone? Just runs a df space -k and then looks at the output. So it's at the very lowest level, it's doing something very simple. But because of the way it's built in to put into the job and therefore into the job stream and so on and so forth, and you can then create dependencies, you can create these very complex workflows that then do either something very simple or something very complex at its very lowest level. And this is all done through this workload designer. And there are new tools coming out all the time. So one of those is the orchestration monitor that allows you to do more things in terms of the monitoring side of things. And you've also got a graphical designer as well. That allows you to create job streams and then drag and drop jobs into them and create associations between them. So you've got a lot of really nice graphical tools that makes creating these jobs a lot easier. And you'll see on the left-hand side, these are the job types that are loaded within this environment. And that's the other thing to say, is that there's 150 different job types. And these are integrations with databases, for example, so Microsoft SQL Server, file transfer ones that allow you to encrypt and compress files before file transfers. Another one that's used quite a lot is the REST API one. So if you're connecting to REST APIs, for example, you've got a specific job type for that. And what that means is you're putting configuration information in rather than having to code. So this is a low code way of doing things. And if you want to see how many job types there are, go to yourautomationhub.io and you'll be able to see all of the different job types that are there. As I was saying, there's about 150, and that's increasing all of the time. So if you're moving from one product over to AWS, and you're using a particular job type, chances are it's already available on the IBM platform. Okay, again, I'm very conscious of time, so I'm going to stop the demo there and go back to the slides. The only other thing I wanted to talk about was the license model for IWS. So how that works is the two main license types are PVU, which stands for processor value units. So that's effectively per server. Bigger the server, the more you pay. And that's calculated based on the number of cores and the processor type. Or the per job model, which is very, very popular, which means you can start small and grow, which is you pay per execution per day. But it's limited in terms of how many times you have to pay. So if you've got a job that runs every 5 minutes, you still only pay once in the 24-hour period in that given day. And then you look at how many jobs that you run in a given month, and that's what you pay for in terms of licensing. And we're seeing lots and lots of organizations that are coming into IWS that are using the per job license model, because you can start small and it doesn't matter how many agents you install and all this sort of stuff, because it's all based on the number of jobs that you run. And that's a SQL query that you do on the master domain manager, and then that's what you pay for. So it's not the number of defined jobs, it's the number of executed jobs. But the cyclic jobs, the ones that are run every hour, every 5 minutes, or more than once in a given day, you only pay for once. And then what we also have, because we provide a managed service, is what's called a job executor license, which is based predominantly on the per job license. But that's a managed service where you get the master domain manager and DWC and all that sort of stuff. And then the agents run within your infrastructure, and you access the DWC within our infrastructure, which is based in IBM Cloud. So those are the three license options that you have. And that was the last piece that I wanted to say, which leaves us 4 minutes for Q&A. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, I see somebody with their hand up. Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks a lot for the presentation. To be honest, I have a lot of questions, but I'm gonna go with some more granular question based on the demo you did. So basically, in the demo that you were showing the dashboard, right?
Yes.
So if you go back to that and you show and you list you said that one agent was running, I think you had like 18 jobs in the whole. Yeah, if you go back, I might be able to remember.
Sorry, Teams keeps getting in the way. Yeah, so if we go back
the one
to the
that was
dashboard.
saying, the dashboard. Okay, so when you list the jobs, where's the
that's
tab?
total.
No, but you have a tab when you show the jobs, like the job's name. I don't remember, it was an administration or something.
Yeah.
But basically what I want to ask there, so here. So I see the job, I see the status, I see that you have a bunch of status as well.
Yeah.
If you compare with what we're using. But I want to understand, for example, these jobs are based in agent, or what is the job contained? Like, for example, what we have with Workload, with Broadcom, right? We used to define a machine object, and inside of the machine, we define the jobs. So where is these jobs being defined? Are they using the action? Yeah, go ahead.
Jobs are held centrally within a database. So in this environment, my underlying database for this demo is Postgres, but DB2 comes with the product. You can use Oracle, Informix, Microsoft SQL Server, a number of underlying databases. So all of the data is held centrally, and then that's called the model. And then you have the plan, which is what's going to be executed within that plan period, which could be a day. So at the start of day, it generates what it's going to run. And that can change, that can be dynamically added to, and then run against the agents that you've defined. So for example, the check disk is run against a workstation called WA FTA. In fact, all three of those are. So depending on your agents, you can run the jobs against the agents, but then report on them centrally, because the agent reports back, I've run this job, this is what's happened, this is the output, it's run successfully, here's the information. That's all held separately, held centrally rather than at the agent level.
Okay, so in summary, I don't need the scheduling as machine itself to hold them. They are held into the agent. You can have multiple jobs into one agent, and then
Yes.
based on the database that you define, you can see all the jobs that can
Yes.
use n amount of agents.
Yeah,
And this amount of agents, they can use n amount of jobs.
And you can have dependencies between jobs on different agents. So you can run the check disk on one agent. Once that's finished, you can run the check DB on another. Bad example, I know, but you have that flexibility to be able to run jobs on different agents and bring all of that information together as part of one workflow. And that workflow is within the job stream. But then you can have a hierarchy of job streams. So you can have, one job stream that runs, and depending on what happens with that one, it can kick off a different one. So you can create lots of hierarchies and dependencies between job streams, between jobs, all these sorts of things. And that's why I kind of refer to workload automation as a bowl of spaghetti, because you can do that in AutoSys, for example. You can do that in Atomic. You can do that in BMC. You can also do it in IWS. And it's making sure that all of those components fit together as they should do to give you the outcome, so that when you do the migration, we focus on the outcome to make sure that that's correct, and then the workflow that supports it. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. It makes sense. I kind of got the idea. I'm still not clear how in a different VM that you have an agent you're gonna have them in sync for the dependency, but I will read about it. That's not a big deal.
Okay. Well, we can have a follow-on session. Yeah, we can demonstrate that to you. That's really not a problem. So I know we've come to the top of the hour for our webinar, but as a follow-on, everyone will be getting the slides and the recording of this webinar, but we can have a follow-on session to actually go through specific scenarios that you have and actually demonstrate all of that to you.
Yeah, that would be good. And another one, if they follow up, because I think the time is up, it will be to include anything regards of the user access, right? Like how they've been onboarded, how you show a quick example, for example, saying cells and no cells and different folders that you were showing that we can represent as app, but how they are onboarded, like what they can read, what they can execute, basically kind of what we have. That would be good to explain all those details. But I'm gonna give some time to my teammates to ask any questions since the time is already up. Thank you.
Okay, I think we had another question.
Yeah, so this is Tanzim. So I know I'm asking based on your experience. So if we have a Broadcom product, and if we want to move to IBM, so the GIL attribute that we have on the Broadcom side, is it 100% match? Like for example, alarm if fail or alarm if terminated or
Yes.
start time. Do you have a mapping that is 100% match? Like all the GIL attributes that generally being used on the CA world is
Yes.
mapped with IBM?
Yeah, absolutely. So Autosys is a great product. The way it structures GILs is very easy to read, very easy to ingest into Workload Migrator. And yeah, all the attributes within your GIL definition can map across to its equivalent within IWS. We're doing a very big one at the moment for a well-known food company in America at the moment, where we're migrating all of their Autosys environment over to IWS.
Understood. So the subsequent question that again, this is maybe not really your question, IBM question, but I would like to ask you. So based on my experience on IBM product, if someone moves from CA to IBM, what major feature or job scheduling perspective, what exactly IBM doesn't provide that CA provides right at this moment?
I'm sure there are some, but
okay, let me ask you. Let me simplify this.
Nothing
So, for
we
example,
haven't come across that we haven't been able to overcome. I mean, in terms of technical features,
right.
most of it is to do with integration. So how you're accessing Autosys today. We've got some customers that only access it via the REST API and things like that, and mapping all of that across to IWS is not insurmountable, but it is a major piece of work. So I would say the biggest difficulty we've had is not actually the job side of things. It's more the integration in terms of how the workload automation environment is used in your end-to-end workflow environment.
Understood. Okay. Last question. So let's assume that if we decide to move on from X to IBM, we're going to have an agreement with IBM that's separate. But then we need to come into a separate agreement with you to help us migrate.
No, you don't. No,
we don't?
You can do it all through IBM.
Okay.
That's the closeness of our relationship with IBM, is that you can do it all under one contract with IBM, and Workload Migrator.
Okay. So where your role ends, like Elysium's role ends, is just from existing workload automation to IBM workload automation, and that's the role ends, and then the rest support and everything goes to IBM.
Yes, and as part of the project, what happens is that when we work with IBM, is they provide the project management, so they take care of the full piece, as it were, including ongoing. So that's all built into the plan by IBM. So they can provide the licensing, depending on which geography you're in. Yeah, we work very closely with IBM.
Understood.
Do you mind? Do you mind telling me which part of the world you're in?
We're in North America.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, we work with lab services, US and Canada, on a lot of projects.
Okay.
So
understood.
Yeah, it's a well-trodden path.
Definitely if we are from North America and you are from Europe, will you match the support time from based on North American time?
Yeah, absolutely. And
Okay.
IBM have the local resources, but the migration is done from the UK. But the time difference actually works out quite well, because it means that we can have things ready for your start of day.
Understood.
Yeah.
And last thing, if we decide to have a further session on more hands-on side of the thing, that can be arranged, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
just
very
let
much for the presentation.
myself or Claire know, and we can engage the appropriate IBM sales
Sure.
team in North America.
Sure. Thank you very much for everything.
Okay, and with that, I'll end the webinar. Thank you all for joining. Really appreciate it. And if there are any follow-up questions, please let Claire or myself know, and we'll get back to you. Okay. Thanks very much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.